welcome to my podcast. I'm your host Stefano, and this is When Leaders Talk, a podcast about leadership, but most importantly, about leaders. This is episode 3, and our guest today is William Toti, a retired US Navy officer, a submariner, just to be precise, who successfully transitioned to the civilian world and became the CEO of a company called Spartan, a company in the defense industry. Other than a former Navy officer and a former CEO of a company, is also the author of a book called From CEO to CEO, From Commanding Officer to CEO, where actually he shared his experience and the challenges that he had to face in the transition. It's a book, of course, is aimed to help those changing life from the military, those leaving the military, to start a new path, a new career. So William has a very broad experience, and we will go through his early years in the Navy to his later career in the defense industry, and all the challenges and the failures and the problems he had to face, and the special situation he found himself into, like 9/11, when he was in the Pentagon when the airplane crashed, or in 2013 when some people of his company were in the Navy Yard in September when some mass shooting happened and 12 people died. It's not only that, we will understand how he envisions a leader, like a building blocks, Lego blocks, and he will describe these Lego blocks that will constitute a good leader, and being probably the most important block, his integrity together with vision, having a vision. Having a vision is a kind of having a direction, knowing where to go, and is fundamental because you cannot just be at sea without knowing what your next protocol is going to be. So I really hope you will enjoy this interview at least as much as I enjoy it. If you like it, subscribe. You can also follow me on other social media like TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Also, for more information about coaching and the services I provide, you can go on masteryourc.com. All right, so I hope you will enjoy it, and I will leave you to the interview. Ciao. So welcome to today's episode, and our guest is William Toti. William Toti, as I said, is a retired officer from the US Navy, so it's kind of colleagues of mine. We speak the same language at least. Welcome, William. Welcome, Bill.
Yeah. Well, the language we speak is both Navy and English because mio italiano è cattivo.
Yeah, right. Actually, I haven't mentioned this. You have Italian origin, so, but yeah, we will go with English. I think it's much better.
Yeah, much better.
Okay, William. So we were going to talk about leadership. This is the podcast, and it's all about leadership and leaders. So the first question that I always ask is, do you have a definition of leadership, and would you mind sharing with us?
There's many definitions of leadership, of course, but the one I like to go with is the one I actually learned a little bit in the Navy, but really started to congeal for me when I was in industry. And my definition of leadership is creating a strategic vision for your organization that's going to take you into the future, and then getting your people, employees, crew members in the Navy, to rally around that vision and help you carry forward. So there's two elements to that. The first element is creating that vision, which is very important. The old saying in English is if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. But the vision is actually maybe more important as important, let's say, than getting your people to help take you there. Because without that vision, You may move in some direction, but it may not be the right direction. So those two elements are very important. Unfortunately, most people think of leadership as a method of motivating. And that's only a tiny fraction of what you need to embody true leadership.
I like it, and going back to our roots as Navy officers, having a vision is like having a destination. So you know where to drive the boat, you where to steer, you know your course, and you want to go there, and you want the people with you to go there. I love it. So how do you
and how to keep from running aground, right? How to keep from
absolutely,
making some accident that's going to cause you to damage your boat. But go ahead.
And actually you say something very important, because it's not just reaching the destination, but it's getting there successfully and safely, right? And it's also the way how you get there, and that's the concept that I'm trying to stress a lot in this podcast. So how do you communicate your vision to the people working with you?
It requires many iterations of the vision said in different ways in order to motivate the different constituencies, because your people are not monolithic. There's just not one single collection of people. There are different groups of people, different demographics of people, each with different motivations and purposes. And the vision will look different to each one of those demographics. So you've got to communicate it in different ways that will make sense to each demographic. So that's point number one. Point number two is 100% of your team needs to understand the mission and their role in the mission. And I joke that everybody from the people, the engineers who are designing your new products, to the people who are cleaning the bathrooms, need to understand what their place is in getting you to where you need to go. Because everybody has a role in that mission. And without everybody pulling together, it's the old story that for lack of a nail, the shoe was lost. For lack of a shoe, the horse was lost, and so on and so forth. The kingdom was lost. And so that's really one of the important things. So the way I would do it is I repeat the message over and over again, not only when I conduct what we call in the Navy all hands meetings, or in industry, our employee meetings, but start every communication with that theme, repeat it over and over and over again, build it into your mission, into your core values of the organization, so that you're reinforcing the theme every chance you get.
Yeah, and that's important also, because you want to tell every single member of your crew, of your team, how important is the role to achieve the goal, right? So, and going back to, once again, to the ship, you might have the guy on the bridge who has pretty much a clear picture of everything that's going on, and then you have the guy in the cook that basically doesn't see them much. So you need to make them understand how important it is, right? I really like it, and how different it is to communicate the vision from a military environment compared to a civilian environment.
So it turns out that it's more different than people want to admit. When I first made my transition to industry, when I was still in the Navy would teach us classes on what civilian industry is going to be like for us. And these classes were taught by people who really never worked in civilian industry. They were hired to teach a course. The curriculum was built by people who were not qualified to write the curriculum. And one of the things that they told us in this training that I really wanted to believe, every one of my classmates who were leaving the Navy really wanted to believe, I've come to call the great lie. And the great lie that they told us in that training was all your future all your future company wants from you is good leadership. Now, of course, we want to believe that because we all think when we're leaving the military that we're good leaders. So we must have all we need to succeed in the future. If we would have given just a little bit of thought, we would have realized that no, good leadership is not all you need. If it was, I was a submarine captain, right? I could go to an Air Force fighter wing and take command. I have good leadership. Isn't that enough? It's not enough. You actually need to know something about those fighters that you're leading, right? Same is true in industry. And we shouldn't have been surprised that what they were telling us was a lie. In industry, you actually need to know something about the mission, the organization, the methods, the procedures of the business that you're trying to lead. And in fact, there's a saying that I developed after I joined industry, where I tell to my military friends that leadership is hard, but it's even harder when you're leading people who can actually quit. And when I'm my submarine, right, my crew may not have liked something I decided, but there was no place for them to go. They were not leaving that submarine. So that allowed me to do certain things that I could not get away with in industry. Because you do those same things.
Yeah, you can push a little bit, right? When you are in command of a submarine or ship, and they know, and that the people, they have a strong discipline and sense of belonging and things, so they will follow you to a certain extent, of course.
To some extent, yeah. But when you're in industry, they vote with their feet, right? And if they don't believe in your mission or your vision, or if your leadership behaviors make them feel like you think they're in the military, and I saw people act that way in business, it did not end well. Then they're going to leave.
Yeah, and you, in your book, From CO to CEO, actually, you describe beautifully how different is the being a leader in the military compared to being a leader in the industrial world or outside the military, by the way. Mm-hmm. Okay, so, and you have this double experience, kind of two phases of your life. So I'm going to ask you a double question. So about challenges, because of course, as you wrote in the book, when the sea is calm, everyone is good at the helm.
Right.
But so what was the most difficult challenge you faced in both the phases of your life?
Mm-hmm. Certainly when I was captain of the submarine, we were tasked with some very challenging missions that I cannot talk about. These were, I would say, high-risk missions, and it was simply a method of making sure that you completed the mission without getting anyone hurt. And actually, as a submarine, you've got to complete the mission without being detected, without anybody knowing you're there. And so there's without doubt, that was the most challenging leadership experience I had in the military. I was in the Pentagon on 9/11, and that was a challenging personal experience, not so much a leadership experience, in dealing with, the impact of the plane and the aftermath and trying to rescue people and things like that. I would say that was the worst day of my time on active duty. But the leadership challenge was while I was captain of the submarine. In industry, my toughest challenge was during an incident that occurred in 2013. I think that's the right year. Maybe it's 2012. No, I think it's 2013. Is referred to as the Washington Navy Yard shooting, where in the Washington Navy Yard, an active shooter killed 12 people. And I had many employees in that base working in that building where the shooting was taking place. And I actually had to fall back on some of my old military training to take command of the situation, track everybody down, make sure everybody was safe, communicate with the various entities, my corporate leaders, and to some extent, federal government leaders as well, the FBI and organizations like that, who were involved with the on-scene reaction. So we could share what my employees knew about the event in a way that would not further endanger them. So that was a very challenging leadership day for me personally. And interestingly, it felt more like events that I needed to deal with when I was in the military than events that I needed to deal with when I was in industry.
And what are the qualities that you use the most during those challenges, in actually in all the episodes that you described?
Yeah. So there are different leadership styles, of course. You can lead in a very kind of directive way, where you take control and start giving orders and things like that. And strangely, both of those examples that I gave you just now required me to draw from that leadership style, where it's not a coaching, not a lifting style. It requires action right now. You listen to information. When you think you have enough information to make a decision, you make a decision and give guidance. So those two incidents I described both required that leadership style. And the interesting thing is, in industry, I almost never use that leadership style. Only during crisis, right? Was I required to use that leadership style. 99.5% of the leadership opportunities in industry, I used a more contemplative, coaching, leadership style, where I tried to bring everybody along together rather than giving guidance and orders. And so there's a lot to say. I call this situational leadership, where you look at the situation and the factors. You decide, how long do I have to react to the situation? Is this something where a decision needs to be made immediately? Or can the decision wait for consensus or more information? And then you adapt the leadership style to the situation to make sure that you aren't abusing. Because if you use the wrong leadership style in a given situation, you could actually make things worse. So it's very important to be very deliberate in how you select your leadership style.
And you touch a very important point, how to be flexible in using the leadership techniques or styles. You can be more democratic sometimes, more coaching, or just more direct, military style if you want, and more executive, like, okay, do this, this, and this, and try probably later on to make sense of everything, analyze what went, how the action went. So, and talking about actions, I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, people leaving the military are often very good at the directive leadership style. And many times they have to learn that other leadership, the softer leadership style, the coaching, contemplative, bringing everybody along leadership style. For them, it's a new skill. And for people that I work with who are in industry who've never served in the military, they frequently assume that military people are just plain old good leaders, and they don't give it much thought about, well, they may be good leaders in one situation, but not in another. And they put them in situations where they are required to use the softer leadership style, and it's a skill they haven't developed yet, and they fail. And this is one of the reasons I wrote the book, is because when that happens, the industry leaders who've never served in the military get very confused by the leadership failure that's being exhibited by their military veteran employees. And they often just say, wow, this person is not good to have around. And they end up letting them fail, rather than saying, he might require coaching just like everybody else. They say, well, heck, he's supposed to be a good leader. Clearly he's not. They let him fail, and then they let him go. And I joke because I call this, because in America, in the United States, oftentimes civilians will say, thank you for your service. And I joke, this becomes, for companies, it becomes, thank you for your service, you're fired. And so I say, look, don't say thank you for your service if there's a chance you're not going to retain this employee, right? So treat them like a normal employee and let them surprise you. But don't assume they know more than they do about how to work or behave in a civilian company. And that's been the thrust of my interaction with industry for the last year or so.
And that's something that you write something like this in the book. And there is one chapter actually where you describe your experience the first time you enter in a company as an employer, basically, and there was a term that stick to my mind. It was a freeloader, right? So can you describe how you cope with this transition? What was your winning quality, if you want, or actually the thing that you did wrong?
Yeah. So initially, when I joined the industry, I was very fortunate that I got promoted twice in 2 years. And that never happens in the military, right? So I was really, I don't have to wait for my turn. I don't have to wait for my seniority level to come up, right? These other guys that have been here longer than me, they don't get promoted first. No, you get promoted when you're ready and they think you can do the job. And so I don't know whether I was a little bit overconfident or, thought that I was, kind of, the word is Teflon coated, right? Everything's going to slide off me. I'm never going to suffer the outcome of my poor performance. I don't know what I thought was going to happen, but I think I got promoted a little too fast. And I started, kind of not performing up to expectations within the company. And so two things happened. But first thing that happened is there was a group of senior leaders who basically started treating me differently, like at arm's length, where it was clear to me that they weren't being the friendly, helpful, bosses and leaders that I had been used to in that company since I joined. It was almost like I had a disease or something. So they didn't want to get close to me anymore.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That was the first thing. The second thing is that one of my bosses, my direct boss, I overheard him referring to retired military people like me as freeloaders. And I'd never heard that expression before. And then when I pulled the string on it, it became obvious that he believed because I was being paid retirement money by the Navy while I was earning a check from my employer, my new company, that it's like I'm a freeloader, right? I'm living off of gift money, in essence. Now, this guy had never been in the military. He didn't know what we do to earn that retirement check, how much you suffer over decades, right? And he was just being a jerk. But that really opened my eyes to how some people thought of us, retired military people who were in industry, that there wasn't very many, to be honest with you. A very small percentage of people look down on you or sneer at you. They think that, well, if you were really talented, you would never have stayed in the Navy, in the military. You would have gotten out and started making real money at a younger age, right? You never would have stayed in for retirement. So that's the preconceived notion that they have. But in the first case where I said I might have gotten promoted a little too quick, it was finally my boss's boss, not my boss, but my boss's boss called me up, and I was in the UK at the time in a hotel room. It was late at night. UK time. He was in California. He called me up, and I hadn't gone to sleep yet, but I was getting ready to go to sleep. And he said, Bill, we need to have a talk. You're screwing this up. Those are the exact words he used, right? We trusted you. We promoted you very quickly. We've given you a lot of responsibility. I was in charge of a more than $1 billion business at that point in time, just 2 years into my civilian career. And he's telling me, you're letting us down. You're screwing this up. When you come back, we need to have a long talk about how we're going to make this right, or you may not be in this job very long. And it was like, what? No one had ever told me in my entire Navy career and in my industry career to that point, no one had ever told me I wasn't doing magnificent. This is the first time anybody had ever told me that I might not be,
the best
great
guy ever. Right.
So,
yeah.
It was very eye-opening. And I had to go back to California where, it wasn't where I lived, but where he worked, and sit down with him and find out what I was doing wrong, and had to do some soul searching.
How did you cope with it? As you said, you were coming from a successful career in the military where you were always great, fantastic. And I mean, I'm sure that by any standards, you were still very, very efficient and effective in the civilian world. But you were coming from an environment more, in a different environment. And you found yourself in this uncomfortable situation of being not as effective or not judged in the same way compared to the military. How did you cope with it? How did you improve your relationship with the new company?
Yeah, first of all, I took every word he said to heart. I didn't get defensive. I didn't push back. I listened to him. And I did, in the computer world, you say, you're going to reboot the computer. You're going to restart it. And I said, I've got to reboot my life here and start it over again, find out what I'm doing wrong. Then I asked for a 360, have everybody evaluate me, bosses, coworkers, employees, and tell me what I need to improve. For example, I went to my peer who was the vice president. I was vice president in the profit and loss business unit. She was the vice president of human resources in my business unit, right? So she was my peer. And I said, so has this conversation been going on behind my back? Have you been talking about my performance? Yeah. Okay, so what do I need? What am I doing wrong? What I need to improve? And I was shocked at how little help she was. She couldn't tell me what I was doing wrong or what I needed to improve. She just said very vague, useless things. Well, your business acumen needs to improve. Well, that's what they're saying. Well, what does that mean, my business acumen? Because clearly I understand the customer. The customer was DOD.
Right.
So that aspect, clearly I understand DOD better than any one of my peers who's never been in the military. Okay, so that's not it. We're hitting our financial targets. So that can. So tell me, I need more information, right? And she wasn't helpful. When I did this 360, what I figured out over time was the matter was more of the way I communicated progress to the business, the company, was not the style that they were used to. And there were times when I was silent on things that I probably should have spoken more about. There were times when I was too revealing, when I said too much about challenges we were having, whereas other leaders at my level were more secretive. They didn't want to say as much when they were having challenges because they didn't want to make themselves look like they were having difficulties or whatever. So it was a cultural thing. I was saying too much in areas I should have said less, and I wasn't saying enough in areas where I should have said more. And once I figured that out, it turned out it wasn't so much a performance issue as an integration into the company's culture issue problem, right? And then I was able to correct that. And it took a while for me it's a lot of steps where I make a couple steps forward, then one step back, a couple more. Then I did better. And then those questions stopped being asked. So at that point I said, okay, but I've kind of, there's a group of people that have an opinion of me that I'm not sure I'll ever change. Maybe this is a good time to look to open my aperture and find out if somebody else in another company might need my help. And I actually answered a phone call from a headhunter that asked me if I was willing to consider another job with Hewlett Packard, with HP. And that was very intriguing to me. And I actually jumped at that chance, and it was a great, great company and great position I got out of that. So I turned this negative into a very big positive.
Yeah, and then you need a lot of you need to be humble to do this. And you actually, there is you mentioned in your book, you need to lower your rank, right? You need to understand that if you come out even as an admiral or a superstar general or anything like this, once you transition, you need to approach the new life in a different way. You need to understand that your rank is gone and you're starting, I'm not saying all over again, but surely from a different level. You need to learn a lot, as you mentioned, about the culture, about the people you have around, how different their motivation is, how different the approach to the work is, generally speaking. Okay, I don't wanna spoil the whole book, so otherwise.
But this is an important point, because when I first joined, I joined the company in a leadership training program, and I was a captain, Navy captain, and it kind of bothered me that they thought I needed leadership training, right? But what it really, but I swallowed my pride, and I said, okay, I don't know this world. I know my world. I don't know this world. So if they think I could benefit from this leadership training and they're willing to invest in me, I should be willing to take the position. And so I joined that company. And when I was first there, I would ask my boss, even though I was in this leadership training program, I think we should do this. What do you think? And he would say, go ask this female employee. I'll call her Alice. Go ask Alice. Okay. And every time I would go to a question, he would say, well, go ask Alice. Well, I'm in my mid-40s. Alice is like 26. And I said, I might have been the captain in the Navy, but here, this 26-year-old outranks me in this company, right? She knows way more than I know. And that's when it occurred to me, I'm an ensign all over again, lowest rank in the Navy, right? She's the lieutenant, and I'm the ensign here. And so in my book, I do say, when you join industry, you have to understand you're the second lieutenant or ensign all over again. Doesn't matter if you come out as an admiral or a general. That 24-year-old knows more than you do. So you have to understand that and act like it.
And that's beautifully said, and it's very important. I love it. So let's go back to your military life. Okay, let's put the uniform on again, if you want. Just virtually, just visually.
The good news is it still fits.
that's perfect.
Happy to say that.
Well, mine too, likely. So the thing is, and you mentioned kind of a failure, almost failure once you transition. What about your military life? Can you describe a moment of failure, actually? And the most important part would be, how did you deal with the failure? What did you do of this experience? How did you manage the communication towards your team or your crew and your people?
Mm-hmm. I was very blessed during my military life. As interestingly, I never thought I would make the Navy a career. every time, from the moment I was commissioned as an ensign, my assumption was that I would do my 5 years that I was required and then transition out. But then every time that happened, where I was facing a decision to leave the Navy, I was given another job that was very interesting to me. And I said, I was offered another job that was very interesting to me. So I said, let me stay in for this job. And then I'll make a decision, right? And then one more, and then one more. And before I knew it, time had gone by. The other aspect of doing this was that I was never trying to focus on my career and be political and get the right jobs to get promoted and say the right things and play golf with the right people. I never worried about any of that. I didn't play golf. I didn't ever pursue the kinds of jobs that were going to get me promoted. And yet, I would be surprised when I would learn, wow, you were selected for command. You were selected for major command, for Commodore, for squadron command. Because when I was selected for these, I'm not even sure I knew that I was under consideration. I was just notified, you've been selected, you've been selected, you've been selected. So I rode this wave almost like a surfer, right? And rode this wave until I decided, you know what, I've got to make a decision now to go into civilian industry, because if I wait longer, I'll be too old to have a real civilian career. So I won't have enough time in my civilian life to have a real civilian career. But to answer your question, the reason I give you that introduction is because I never positioned myself in a way where I was trying to be political, to calm people's feelings, to make my bosses feel good, to compliment them. I always just tried to do my job. And sometimes that was good, and sometimes that was not so good. So the thing that comes to mind to answer your question, when I was Commodore, I was commander of a squadron of 6 submarines. And as Commodore, one of my jobs was to make sure that the submarine, a submarine in my squadron, is properly trained and certified to go on its next mission. And I provide the properly trained and certified mission to the forward deployed admirals that can use the submarine in the way they want to use it. And I had one submarine that was not performing to standards. Now, I was experienced in the mission that it was going to be tasked doing from when I was captain of a submarine. So I knew exactly what that submarine needed to do from my time as captain. And I knew that this submarine was not going to do well if we sent it on a similar mission. They just had not developed the skills necessary to perform on that mission. And they gave me a timeline. And at the end of the timeline, the submarine wasn't ready. And I told the admiral, I can't certify this submarine for that mission. I can give me another month, I can get another submarine ready, but this submarine's not going to be ready when you need it to do that mission. He was not happy. And he said, but it's your job. And I know, I agree. It's my job. This is my failing. But if I send that submarine out and tell you it's ready and it gets in trouble, that's on me. It's not on you. That's on me. And I can't do it. And he pressured me a great deal to, and the interesting thing is this admiral had never done one of those missions himself. So, from my point of view, he really didn't know what it takes, what skills you need to develop in order to succeed on that kind of mission. I did. And so I was not going to succumb to his pressure to declare the submarine ready when I didn't think it was ready. And I don't know if that ever really affected me from a professional standpoint. But I knew I didn't care because I could sleep at night.
Well, it was true to yourself, right? I mean, you were honoring your values, right? I mean, then you didn't want to betray your beliefs and whatever is your system of values that makes
That's right.
the leader that you are. Okay, and let me ask you this then. I know, what is the most important value or the most important values that you have? You know, what is for you something that a leader, at least you, has to have?
That's a tough question because it requires so many, right? But if I were to say one thing, it would be integrity. Right? Integrity also implies honesty and a whole bunch of other things. But again, I've worked around some leaders that were thought very highly of, that were very politically savvy, that were very gregarious, likable, that other people, including their bosses, really, really liked. But you knew they lacked integrity. And if they were given a free rein, sooner or later, they were going to get themselves and their organization in trouble. And you could predict that it was going to happen. You may not know exactly when or where or how, but you knew sooner or later it was going to happen. In almost every case, it was a failure of integrity and not being honest with themselves, not being honest with their bosses, and creating this atmosphere of success that was kind of, masking underlying failure. And that never goes well.
No, I totally agree. And, you mentioned integrity, and earlier we talked about vision. If a leader was like a building block, you can build leaders with Legos. How would you, what else would you add to it?
The truth is, and this kind of is implied by my earlier statement that when I talked about the great lie, all your future employer wants from you is good leadership. The reason that's not true is because you actually need to know something about what you're doing, about whether you're flying a plane or driving a submarine or running a company. You actually need to know something, if you're going to be running an IT company, about the likely failure mechanisms of that business, right? And how to prevent those failures from happening. So one of the Legos has to be a good technical understanding of the foundations of your business, because that's going to inform you about where we also said earlier, you don't want to run aground. You don't want to run into the shoal water, where the shoal waters are. As a technical person who has physics undergraduate, engineering graduate school, right? I understand enough about the technical aspects of my various jobs to know maybe I couldn't design things anymore. I didn't have those skills, but I kind of knew enough to know when I was being lied to. And if I didn't have that technical background and I was running a technical company, all I could do is accept what people were telling me. I don't think I would have been as successful as I was. So a good technical understanding. Now, if you're doing finance company, that technical understanding is an understanding of finance, right? If you're doing a recruiting company, that's an understanding of, employability and human traits and characteristics that are going to help people succeed. I'm not saying everybody needs to be an engineer, not at all. I'm talking about the technical aspects of whatever business you're in. So another Lego needs to be communication. You either need to be able to communicate in ways that are going to connect with your customers, shareholders, and employees, or, and here's another Lego, you need to be self-aware. You need to be self-aware enough to know I don't have that ability. I'm not a good communicator. So I need somebody who can fill in that gap for me, who is a good communicator. So that person will do the thing I cannot do because I don't have the skill. Okay. So it's self-aware. The next one I would say is management skills. And in the book, I do talk about the difference between leadership and management. Management is more mechanical. It's more transactional. It's more event by event, tracking progress, measuring progress, using methods like Six Sigma or Lean. And if you don't have those skills yourself, you need to supplement yourself with somebody who does. And by the way, those skills pertain to every business type, not just manufacturing, but what are the metrics you're using if you're in recruiting? What are the metrics you're using to show success if you're in marketing? Those metrics apply to every business type and every military organization. So that's another one. I'm running out of Legos. So
it's okay. It's okay. Actually, it's a lot. And even when you mention self-awareness, it's very simple to talk about self-awareness. It's very difficult actually to really get in touch with our inner self. It's a complex. It's a complex process. How did you do that? How have you done this? And actually, it's a continuous process as well. So, how did you do every day? How did you get in touch with yourself, your inner self?
I talked earlier about the fact that I never intended for the Navy to be my career. I was always operating under the assumption that this would be my last job. And from the time I was at the academy, from the time I was at Annapolis, I was always introspective, asking myself, can I do this? Can I get through this academy? Can I graduate? I didn't have trouble academically. I had trouble with the physical aspects of the academy, the running and the obstacle courses and stuff. I was skinny and wasn't very strong. And so that was my challenge. So I started out very young, being very introspective. What are my weaknesses? And what do I need to do to supplement or to overcome those weaknesses? And my first job, being a junior officer on a submarine, is not easy. It's a very challenging time, something that even the academy doesn't prepare you for, because there are days when you're going to be awake without sleep for 72 hours on a difficult mission. And nothing prepares you for that except going through it. And it's, there are times when you're just not having fun. It's a lot of hard work. And you say to yourself, is this for me long term? How many years can I do this? You have to be very introspective and say, yes, I got through this. But what about the next time I'm assigned to a submarine? Can I get through this again? I'll be in a higher rank and a higher position, but it doesn't mean it's all going to be easy. So all the way through my life, I had to ask myself those questions. What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? If I go this path, what do I need to do? If I go this path, what do I need to do? Which one is more interesting? Which one is easier? And if the more interesting one isn't the easier one, do I want the easier? And throughout your life, you need to make those evaluations.
Oh yeah, it's I guess an everyday thing. And if you're not introspective, I may add, you can go to a coach. That will help.
That's right. Yeah, like you.
And yeah, and so let's go back to the Lego leader. Is there anything you will never add to it? Something they will say, oh no, this is really against my idea of leadership.
Yes, and I had this experience in industry. It caused me to leave one of my employers. So one of my employers, you're always competing to win new programs when you're in industry, right? And that's a healthy thing. In my case, I was working in defense companies for most of my career, not all my career, but for most of my career. And so you're trying to win a program and do your best. You're trying to give the best solution at the best price. So the competition is a healthy thing, but you don't always win. Sometimes you don't have the best engineers on a certain pursuit, or you're stretching a little bit too far, or the customer doesn't believe that the solution you proposed will work, and they decide not to select you. There's several reasons why you could actually be the best choice and not win. It happens. Well, it happened to me once, and my boss decided that our best course of action was going to be to go to Congress and get the money taken away from the service for that program, so our competitor wouldn't win either. And he asked me to do that. He asked me to go engage with Congress, with our friends in Congress, and get them to pull the money out of the appropriation. And it was a program I knew that the customer needed, and I thought that was playing dirty. And I decided I wasn't going to do that. So I said no. And so, yeah, was that amoral? Or I think it was unethical. I don't think it was necessarily, amoral.
It goes back to
really.
I'm sorry. It goes back actually to the concept of integrity that you mentioned earlier, right? I mean, you were, as I say, true to yourself, and you kept, and this was such an important issue for you, that was the right, not excuse, but the right motivation to leave the employer, right?
Yeah. And in this case, we truly believed that we had the better solution. And we truly believed that the customer selected the wrong answer, the wrong solution. And we believed that he believed, in his defense, he believed that no new solution would be better for the customer than the wrong new solution, that this would be money wasted because it wouldn't work, or it wouldn't work the way the customer believed it would work. So I'm not going to challenge the reasons he was pushing to get the money withdrawn. He probably in his own mind thought he was actually doing the customer a favor, not wasting millions of dollars. But from my point of view, look, there's rules to the game. We both played the game according to the rules, and it didn't go our way. And we're not children who then takes our toys and go home, right? We're going to live to fight another day. The customer will learn from this experience. If we're right, they're going to regret their decision, and they're going to like us even more. But if we do what you want us to do, they're going to hate us. Right. And it's not going to go well for us in the long. So whether we look at it from our point of view or from the customer's point of view, in my view, it was the wrong thing to do. And so that's why I refused. Yeah, and I ended up leaving that company because I didn't like being put in a position where I was asked to do something that I considered to be not in the best interest of our company or our customer.
Yeah, and I completely understand what you're saying. And going back to your period, well, actually both in the Navy and outside the Navy, where you were working in the companies and everything, what was the motivation? What was the force that was pushing you to go to work and do a grade officer, or grade vice president, or executive, or a CEO? Where did you get this motivation from?
I don't know. It was always there. But I always, no matter what I was doing, even as a junior officer, I always wanted to do a really, really good job. And it wasn't that I was competing with others. In my view, I was competing with myself, right? Because I remember one time when I was a junior officer, when there are, let's say, 7 or 8 junior officers on a submarine, and I was not ranked number 1, and the captain asked, I was ranked number 2, and the captain asked, does it bother you that you are ranked behind this person? And I said, is there anything I could have done better? What did I fail to do? And I knew that person was well liked before. He was just easy to like. And if I'm honest with myself, maybe I wasn't so easy to like. Okay. And so I asked the captain, is there anything I failed to do or could have done better? And the captain said, no, I can't think of anything. And I said, well, I'm competing with myself, not with him. So if there's nothing I could have done better, I can make peace with this. And so the motivation was always there in the military. Like I said, I never sought to be captain of the submarine. I never sought to be commodore of a submarine squadron. To me, those things, it would look like those things just dropped in my lap. I was happy they did. And I was eager and enthusiastic and really welcomed the opportunity to serve in those roles. But it wasn't like I was going to be heartbroken if that didn't happen, because I always wondered about my second life and my civilian career. I was always wondering, so maybe, when is the time to move to my second career to see if I could do as well in industry as I've done in the military? Because I think that's going to be a very different challenge. And I'm just interested to see if that's going to work for me, or if I'm kind of good at this and not good at anything else. If that's the case, then I'm going to regret leaving the military. But for me, I made the move probably later, maybe later than I should have, maybe by a couple of years. But it still worked out. And I'm still very glad that I did make the move and have that full second career in industry after 26 years in the Navy.
Well, our time is almost running out, but I have the last couple of questions. The first one is, which is your biggest success, and how did you celebrate it?
So this is going to sound very strange. Again, you didn't tell me what questions you were going to ask, so no, I didn't prepare.
I like strange. So go for it.
Yeah. Okay. So when I was at Hewlett Packard, when I did make that jump to my second company, the business that I was put in charge of had done very, very poorly, and it was up for recompete. The largest contract in all of Hewlett Packard, it was a multi-billion-dollar contract, was in my business area, and it was up for recompete. And the joke in the Navy, because I still had friends in the Navy, was they were going to compete this, and it was going to be called the Anybody But Hewlett Packard competition. In other words, they were going to welcome anybody winning but us, because we had performed so poorly. And so when I joined and got in that job, I asked myself, oh my God, this is going to be the end of my career. This is career suicide. I didn't know how bad it was, how much we are hated. But I have 18 months before the competition happens to turn this around. Now, understand, I had 4,000 employees on that contract. So that's 4,000 mortgages, 4,000 kids' colleges, 4,000, paychecks, monthly paychecks. So this was a big deal to a lot of people. And when I took over, it was not looking good. The Navy was giving us very poor reviews of our performance. So this was a reboot. I talked about reboot earlier. We had to reboot the performance. First of all, we had to bring performance up to standard. so the customer would be willing to consider the possibility that we might win. So that was challenge number one. Challenge number two is educate the customer, because it was clear to me they did not know, they did not understand how complex this world that they had created was. They thought it was much simpler than it was. So we had to educate them without talking down to them, without coming across as arrogant. Oh, you think we can't live without you? Well, we'll show you. No, we had to educate. So we started doing a series of, here's the way the system works. Training programs for the customer. So they could say, and we had to do this, and we had to do this to make this work. You wanted this to work. You have to understand we had to do this. Because we were hiding all of that from them because we thought it was proprietary, intellectual property, and we didn't want it to get out. But by doing that, we were creating a perception that it was way easier than it really was. And the customer didn't accept the complexity that they had created. And then, of course, we had to become way more humble. One of the problems was we thought we were the smartest people on the planet, and we would talk down to the customer all the time. We would sneer at them. You guys think you can do that. Let me tell you, that'll never work. No. Instead, we pivot that and say, okay, we understand the objective. So have you thought about doing this? So we become solution providers, not geniuses who you fail to appreciate. And so 18 months later, we won the recompete. Shocked everybody, including ourselves. The bottom line is it worked, and we won the recompete. And it was a $5 billion contract award. So it was the biggest contract in Hewlett-Packard history. And we had a party when it was done. You asked, how did we celebrate? We had a party, and I'll never forget the day that I learned that we had won the contract, the recompete. I was driving home after work that day, and a song by Eminem comes on the radio called Lose Yourself. It's Eminem, very famous song, Lose Yourself, right? And there's words in the song that I've forgotten, but you gotta never let it go. You got one shot, take a hold of it and don't let it go, something like that, right? And so I turned the radio volume way up, and I was screaming. I opened the windows and I was screaming out the window because I have 4,000 employees now who know they have a job, right?
Yeah.
And I was screaming the song out the window, and people thought I was crazy. And then when we had the party to celebrate later, as I came on the stage, I made the audiovisual people play Eminem Lose Yourself as I walked on the stage and start everybody cheering, right? And they think, hey, he swears in this song. Are they going to be okay with this? And I said, I don't care. It was a song I heard when I was driving home. We're going to play. And they went wild. And, we had a great party, and it was very, I still remember that, so heartwarming. That time, and just bizarre, right? Strange, but true.
Well, apparently I asked the right question. And we did not agree on anything.
That was too long, right?
No, it's okay. But so congratulations for the achievement and the celebration. Actually, that's it sounded very fun. So the last question, and it's another question that I like to ask to every guest in this podcast is, if someone approaches you, and asks you, hey, Bill, I want to be a great leader, what should I do? What's your answer?
Make sure you understand where you are. In the Navy, we call it taking a fix. Where are you really? Not where people think you are, not are you self-deluding to believe that you're in a better position than you are? Where are you really? Where do you need to be? Anticipate the future. Where does the organization need to be? Understand what talent you're going to need to get there that you don't already have, what talent you have that you won't need. There's the harvest aspect, right? Don't provide yesterday's talent for tomorrow's solutions. How do I need to migrate the talent base? You've got to look at it holistically, from technical ability, from talent, from vision, from systems. Do you have the right systems to track progress to get you where you're going to go? Marketing, everything. And then do all of that analysis before you create the vision or articulate the vision. Because when you articulate the vision, people need to believe you can actually get there. So you need to have an understanding of how you're going to get there before you state this, aspirational vision that everybody then laughs at because they think it's fiction, right? They need to believe in the vision and that you can really do it. And you have to have all of that understood before you go live with your leadership vision. And then it takes daily work to make sure that you're course correcting, again, to use the Navy expression. We had some wind that pushed us off a little bit. How do I need to correct the course to get to where I need to be? That requires continuous effort. It's not a one, aim it and forget it. That never works. Continuous monitoring and continuous correction.
That's great. Thank you, William. Thank you very much for having been here with us and for sharing your great experience and your transition. That is not important only for who is in the military and thinking about leaving the military and transitioning in a civilian career, but generally speaking, for whoever actually is thinking about changing type of profession and career. So thank you very much. It has been a pleasure, and hopefully we'll meet in person at some point.
Absolutely, Stefano. Thank you very much for having me.